Hello everyone and welcome to Guild Wars 2 Daily. Today we're going to be talking about lore and we're going to be choosing the last profession that I'll be showing you in the beta, which we'll cut to later. And the footage in the background comes from Guild Wars Online again. I really enjoy their PvP stuff, so there's going to be a bit more PvP today. Yeah, let's get started. First, kind of before we get in, I had a lot of questions on the last lore episode to do with the story of Malchor. And also I found it really awesome where I only said the name Malchor, so I got to see how everyone thought it was spelt in the comments. It's Malchor, by the way, in case anyone's wondering. But yeah, lots of people said, well, why wasn't Malchor blinded? Which is a big part of the story. You're right, it's a huge omission as far as we can see. And actually, that's what I quite like about the story. It's not explained why he isn't blinded. It's a part of the story, I think, that gives it its magic. And I think it makes Malchor more of an interesting character than you might at first think. Now, you'll notice, you can go read it on the wiki or listen back to me reading it, that story never actually calls Malchor a human. It never defines what race he is. And all we know is that really humans are blinded when they look upon the gods. It just says, and it's very non-specific and it's very trickily worded if you look back, it just says they fetched a sculptor, and we know that this sculptor was a male, but we don't know anything else about what that sculptor was. That sculptor could have been any species. Another species that was brought to Tyria alongside the humans were the Forgotten, who I've mentioned a few times already. Well, maybe Malchor was a Forgotten, because these guys, in effect, for a while it seemed, were the minions of the gods, and in fact they remained in that capacity right up until nightfall. When you go into Abaddon's realm himself, who is it that's there? It's the Forgotten. So maybe Malchor was a Forgotten, one of these snake-like people. Maybe Malchor was one of the races that we're now familiar with in Guild Wars 2, or maybe he was a completely different race that we don't know about. It's a bit of a mystery about his character. Why wasn't he blinded? And we don't really have a reason, but this is one of those things you can ask yourself. Maybe one day we will find out specifically who Malchor was. I mean, we never know. Maybe when you're actually swimming around there in the Strait of Malchor, there's going to be some kind of dynamic event that revolves around that character and that story. Could be quite interesting. But yeah, so there was that the last episode, which is kind of a question lots of people ask. So there you go, we don't actually know. And let's just get started on the other questions. The first one was asked by Legion of Onslaught, who said, when you say no human, and this is kind of related, he said, when you say no human can enter the city of the gods, does that mean it may be possible for the other races? Well, see, this is the other weird thing about this story of Malchor when it talks about how no humans could be in the city of the gods at all. Perhaps while the gods lived there, there certainly did seem to be at least parts of Arah, the city of the gods, that humans couldn't go in. We've had other descriptions of the way that life was for humanity during the time that the gods lived on Tyria and they lived in this city themselves, and those examples have suggested that it was a real city filled with humans. It was just that each god seemed to have their own area within that city that humans could go nowhere near, like the living quarters of the gods. Because we've also had stories about humans marching and having parades and things for Balthazar, the god of war, and we've heard things of this nature. So it certainly does suggest that humans could exist, at least in part, within the city. Maybe not live there, maybe only visit there, but they certainly do seem to have had some access. More access than the story that Malchor is described in actually suggests. Now, once the gods themselves are gone, definitely humans ended up living there, because now we have stories about humanity, in particular the Orions, the people that lived there. The city of the gods was on Arah, right? And the Orions, as a people, ever since the gods left, remained very deeply spiritual and religious, right? And over these years, I suppose expecting the gods to come back at some time, they looked after Arah and they kept it clean and they tried to make it as picture perfect as they could, exactly as it was before the gods left, for as long as they possibly could. And they continue to do that for the 1,000 years on, and that's kind of the role that the Orions served from that point. And then of course we also have the story of the guild wars themselves. Really, these escalated into full-fledged war between nations rather than just small guilds as it started, and this really escalated because war and blood was actually shed on the streets of Arah. So there were humans fighting in Arah, and at that point when these guilds were fighting in the holy city, the Orions were like, we're not having any of this. We have tried so hard to make sure that Arah has remained sacred and we do not want blood spilt here. So Or as a nation rose against this fighting, and then it didn't take long for Kryta and Ascalon to follow suit, and that's kind of how the guild wars developed. Why they're called guild wars, despite the fact they were really fights between nations. So we hear there as well that the humans were actually in the city. So in your question, you seem to suggest that you've got the impression humans just weren't physically capable of going in there for whatever reason, and maybe other races could. Well, the truth is humans were in there quite a lot, and they definitely were around Arah quite a lot. There might have been parts of Arah that humans specifically never saw. Maybe inside the living quarters of the gods, they never actually went in. But for the majority of the city, yeah, humans were around there. And there's nothing to say that other races could have gone in there as well at some point. In fact, it was very much the Char's intention to assault Arah and to take over Arah. And it was the king's decision at that time to never let that happen. So he destroyed the whole continent, really, in the Cataclysm. So yeah, these races, humans and other races alike, could have gone into Arah. That story is maybe just slightly misleading in some ways. Okay, and the last question was asked by Cromgar1337, who said, has ArenaNet clarified if Drakkar is dead? Considering he was a champion, it is noted that Jormag has new champions now. The reason I ask is Drakkar is the only creature to fill me with extreme dread and terror upon seeing it. Is it possible he could have multiple, though? This is really, really kind of cool, and Drakkar is one of those things I'd love to know the fate of as well, and to my knowledge, no, we don't know what happened to him, or where he went, or where he was defeated, if indeed he has been defeated. So in Guild Wars 1, Eye of the North was released to introduce players to the plots that were going on in Guild Wars 2, and a part of that was ArenaNet had all these kind of eggs littered around the landscape, and these were the sites of great beasts that we at the time thought were the Elder Dragons themselves. One particularly prominent one was the one in the Char homelands that people still contest to this day is Kralkatorrik. You can see like the back of Kralkatorrik as he sleeps, that the Char now seem to have just taken as great hills in the fields that they can't really do very much with. So, and obviously at the end of Eye of the North you do see one of the Elder Dragons, you see the head of Primordus himself. So one of these great beasts was under a giant ice lake that the Norn call Drakkar Lake. You can actually see one of these giant beasts down there. It looks like not a traditional Western dragon, but a really kind of interesting long snaky dragon that goes really, really deep down under the water, and it is vast. It is a massive, massive creature. So at the time, as I say, we all thought that these were the Elder Dragons, but later on it was announced actually that this wasn't an Elder Dragon at all. We were not looking at Jormag that was under that ice. We were simply looking at one of the champions of Jormag. We're familiar that every Elder Dragon seems to have a champion, but in Edge of Destiny, we learn that Jormag's got a different champion. By that point, I won't spoil what happens in the story, but he has got a different champion then. So the question is, does that mean Drakkar has been defeated and now replaced, or does that mean Drakkar is still around and Jormag actually has more than one champion? Because the answer to that could mean a lot in how different the different Elder Dragons can be, because it certainly looks like Zaitan, at the very least, only has one champion at once. So that could be a distinction between Jormag and Zaitan. The other notable thing about Drakkar, or what we thought was Jormag at the time, was that this creature, even though it seemed to be asleep or frozen under this lake, still managed to corrupt a Norn called Svarnir, who was Jorah's brother, and he became the Norn Bear, which later then essentially triggered a whole movement in the Norn and created something called the Sons of Svarnir, which are a group of Norn that actually worship this dragon and seek to make themselves more powerful through communing with the dragon itself. So really, Drakkar has had a big impact on how the Norn function and a lot of the stories that have kind of split out from what we saw in Eye of the North. So what's going on with him? He certainly looked very big and very intimidating, and like you say, it is quite terrifying to see him down there, but we've heard nothing about what was really going on with him. So I would like to see in Guild Wars 2 we find that he's still about, and that's a big bit of the story, but who knows at this point. But Drakkar was a very cool mystery that was established in Guild Wars 1 that I'd hope to find continued in Guild Wars 2. Anyway guys, that's me done for today. Guild Wars 1 had a big update today because it's the 7th anniversary of the game, so I'm going to go off and do some content for that. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you've got any question, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot, our Norn player is going to be an Elementalist. I had a hell of a lot of votes, and I do agree we haven't had much footage of Elementalist going on at the moment. So the Norn's going to be an Elementalist, the Human's going to be a Ranger. On this video, let me know what you want to see my Char character be, okay? What profession should we have the Char be? Thanks very much, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.